Let it be me. This is not a fighting song. Let it be me. Not a wrong for a wrong. Let it be me. If the world is light, shine my life like a light.
Hi, I'm Sam Waterston. Welcome to the Visionaries. The great heroes of our time are not those who achieve fame or fortune. They are the men and women who unite us, who draw on the wonderful diversity of people in pursuit of common interest. Harry Edmonds was such a person. In the early 1900s, at a time when foreigners were particularly mistrusted and discriminated against, Harry Edmonds experienced something that would change his life and send him on a lifelong crusade to bridge the cultural divide, turning enemies and strangers into friends. His vision led to the creation of international houses. They're places where students and scholars from across America and around the world live together in peace and understanding. In a dramatic test of the power of friendship, many people who live at international houses come from countries that are sworn enemies. They are Arab and Jew, Chinese and Tibetan, Indian and Pakistani, living under one roof. It was Harry Edmonds' dream that by living together, people would develop lifelong friendships that would serve as the basis for a more peaceful world, and they did. To witness his vision in action, we take you to one of the international houses. It's on the University of California campus in Berkeley.
Hi, welcome to iHouse. My name is Vlasta and I'm from Bosnia.
Hi, my name is Trevor Bosman and I'm from Irvine, California.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Claire-Marie, je viens de France.
My name is Busayo Olufona and I'm originally from Nigeria, but I live in Davis, California.
This is not a house. This is a home.
My name is Julia Zamarska and I come from Poland.
Namaste, I'm Mohit. मैं इंडिया से हूँ.
This is not just, a bunch of students living here. This is a community.
Oi, o meu nome é Maria e eu sou do Brasil, do Rio de Janeiro.
G'day, welcome to iHouse. My name's Tobias, I'm from Australia.
Everything from the dining room to going in the elevators to doing the laundry is a cross-cultural experience. When you walk the halls of International House, when you sit in the dining room, you hear the music of languages from all over the world.
At first glance, International House looks like just a dorm with a dome. But take a closer look, and you'll find a mini United Nations with people from more than 85 different countries living here.
Sometimes people call New York like a whole separate country, so maybe I regard myself as a foreigner in some sense here in California.
Every year, more than 600 people live at International House. They are all students who have come to Berkeley to study at one of the most prestigious universities in America. But their real-world education is happening outside the classroom.
And it does make a big difference in terms of making you realize that this is not, the united world of America. This is a big world with lots of different countries and lots of different people who actually live those situations that you read about. You hear incredible stories from people here about where they've come from. Sometimes they've come from really harsh situations.
Top-Den Searing looks like your average college kid, but he has lived his entire life in a refugee camp. He's a political exile from Tibet.
I'm a Tibetan. My parents, they fled Tibet in 1960. They were not married at the time. So they fled shortly after the Dalai Lama escaped from Tibet.
The Dalai Lama reaches safety on Indian soil after a 14-day trek across the Himalayas, a fugitive from Red China's bloody repression of the Tibetan revolt.
Without a home, without a country, Topden's parents also made the grueling journey to India. Not everyone in his family survived.
My grandfather died fighting the Chinese. So I have all the reasons to hate the Chinese.
Topden had never met anyone from China before coming to Berkeley. But here it was just a matter of time. After all, there are more than 20 Chinese students sharing his home.
That's Chinese, meaning hello.
Gaia Zhou is one of them.
When I was in China, I never paid attention to issues about Tibet.
She was so indifferent to the Tibetan issue. I mean, she didn't want to hear about it.
Here, suddenly, we've got this, a real person from Tibet I have to confront.
Of course, like initially it's a lot of arguments, you know, beating the table and stuff like that, banging on the table, just not listening at all, like walking away in a huff and stuff like that.
So there we were, next to each other, sitting, around the table, exchanging ideas.
And that's what these reincarnate lamas, the Dalai Lama, all these reincarnate beings are doing.
A major clash of ideology and a painful 2,000-year history make it difficult to come face to face.
It's not an easy thing, and for anyone to come away from this thinking that International House is going to destroy prejudices, shatter stereotypes overnight, it doesn't happen that way. It happens in a moment, and that moment nourishes other moments, and those moments nourish a change in attitude and an enlargement of the human spirit.
It was hard for her first to hear that the Dalai Lama is a nice person, that he does not mean no harm at all. He's a really nice person. And secondly, it was hard for her to hear that I'm a different person, I'm not Chinese, I'm Tibetan.
The thing about it is, he was telling all the stories about Tibetan people, which I would never, ever had any chance to know about if I had not met him.
It's exactly the kind of encounter Harry Edmonds dreamed would be possible when he created International House in the early 1900s. For Harry Edmonds, the dream of building an international house began in New York City in 1909.
iHouse started, as some of you may know, as an accident. One brief moment of time. It could have gone
Nearly a century later, at a retreat to welcome new residents, the executive director of Berkeley's International House shares the inspiring story of Mr. Edmonds' vision.
The only thing I know is iHouse was invented, created, because of a Chinese scholar. So it is related to China, somehow.
It's the story of a meaningful chance encounter that changes a man's life.
A Chinese scholar walking up the steps of Columbia University in New York City. And a gentleman from the United States was walking down the steps, saw him, and said, "Good morning." The man who said good morning, his name was Harry Edmonds. And the Chinese scholar looked at him in shock, surprise, a double take. And the gentleman from New York City said to him, "What's wrong?" And the Chinese scholar said, "I have been in this country for 3 weeks, and you are the first person who has spoken to me."
And that made my grandfather think about being someplace and being all alone and not having anyone to speak to. I think he had a lot of empathy and that people could really talk to him. Plus his energy was extraordinary, and I think that, that energy really sparks meetings with people.
With funding from John D. Rockefeller Jr., the first International House opened in New York City in 1924.
Well, the house was an immediate success. the blood, sweat, and tears of all those pre-house years began to pay off in a big way.
With the success of that house was born the idea, why don't we build one on the West Coast? And the thought was, well, where on the West Coast should we build it? And they decided we ought to do it in Berkeley. And why was it Berkeley? It was Berkeley because in those days, the largest number of students from overseas were on this campus.
But in the 1920s, the San Francisco Bay Area was a very different place than the liberal activist community it is today. The very idea that men and women, whites and non-whites, would live together under one roof was scandalous.
I was alternately called a dirty Jap or Ching Ching Chinaman or something like that from children in the school or my classmates. And I very miserably and sadly accepted my fate.
Tomoyo Takahashi moved to International House in the 1930s, at a time when interracial marriages were illegal in Berkeley and the whole area around the University of California was segregated.
And part of the real essence of that segregation was on Piedmont Avenue, where there were fraternities that totally excluded people of color.
It was very difficult in those days for Oriental minorities. We were called Orientals in those days.
There's a lot of gibbering Asiatics in the street where property's not worth anything.
More than 1,000 Berkeley residents erupted in protest to stop International House from being built in their community. But this racist opposition only strengthened founder Harry Edmonds' resolve.
Mr. Edmonds said, let's put International House right in the middle of the bigotry.
In a symbolic joining of West and East, International House Berkeley defied the bigotry and opened its doors in the summer of 1930. And so at a time when America was closing itself off from the rest of the world, here a global community was forming.
Remember, we were pretty isolationistic in the 20s and 30s after the experiences of the First World War. iHouse was created at that moment of sort of peak isolationism, cutting us off from the rest of the world. Berkeley was an exception to that isolationism.
World War II would bring America's period of isolationism to an abrupt end and challenge International House's foundation of fellowship and understanding.
I remember on a Sunday morning I was studying for finals up in my room on the 7th floor. I had a great view from there of the whole Bay Area, panoramic view. And as some relaxation from studying the books, I looked out the window, stuck my head out the window, and somebody downstairs on the floor below me called up and said, "Have you heard about Pearl Harbor?" I said, "What? What harbor?"
Flash, Washington. The White House announces Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor.
Here's the bulletin. Washington, the president decided today, after Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor and Manila, to call an extraordinary meeting of the cabinet for 8:30 p.m. tonight.
The atmosphere then was just charged with tension and hostility, urgency. It was war hysteria.
I have tonight issued a proclamation that an unlimited national emergency exists.
That night we had air raid precautions. We had to black out everything.
In the climate of the Second World War, when people were talking about the master race, that entire notion was totally antithetical to the principles of International House, where people were to come together and to live equally. Same bathrooms, same food, same treatment, as much as is humanly possible, with all of our faults, to prove the lie to the notion of the master race.
So nationalities weren't mattering at that point.
Bring you this important bulletin from the United Press. Flash.
Even with their countries at war, Americans, Japanese, Germans, Italians, and Russians all came together in the Great Hall.
We were, at least figuratively, holding hands, in some cases literally holding hands, while we listened to those bulletins come in.
The nation will expect all individuals and all groups to play their full part.
But it soon became clear playing a full part did not mean the same thing for all citizens.
Notices were posted. All persons of Japanese descent were required to register.
Japanese Americans were targeted as potential spies and sent away to wartime prison camps.
Pearl Harbor was December 7th, and then the following spring, in around April, people of Berkeley were told to go.
It's not that we were willing, but we were helpless.
When they were boarded on buses bound for internment camps, they were only a mile from International House. But nothing could be further from the feeling of refuge they had found there.
We said to ourselves is, well, we're all together, we have to help each other. So we organized Americanization classes just to show how patriotic we were and how unworthy we were to be locked up like that.
I had personally, and I think most other people had, very strong feelings about our friends who were being sent away and indignation that this was happening.
Vocal opposition to the treatment of Japanese Americans during World War II was scarce, especially on the West Coast. But there were a few who had the courage to speak out. Alan Blaisdell, iHouse Berkeley's first executive director, was one of them.
He made people change their minds if they were questioning the validity of such a wholesale movement of 120,000 Japanese Americans.
In a telegram to a radio news station, Mr. Blaisdell called the forced migrations and economic disenfranchisement Hitler methods that destroyed the democracy for which we fight. He also worked quietly behind the scenes to help Japanese American students get away from the West Coast war hysteria.
He sent a letter to all the Japanese American students asking them to come to International House and see if there was anything he could do.
50 years later, when the American government apologizes and pays restitution for its actions, one former student says thank you by sharing a portion of her redress check with International House. Even today, it remains a place of refuge.
So I remember that I wrote on my application for the iHouse that ever since Yugoslavia fell apart, I've been looking for a place where people live together, can live together regardless of where they come from. And maybe it's a fantasy of mine. I mean, you know, if you live through what people in the Balkans lived through, a lot of people would say it's a fantasy. But I needed that kind of fantasy, and I actually found it here at the iHouse.
Whether it's a California Hang Ten fashion show or the Hindu New Year in October, international celebrations help students overcome personal stereotypes and prejudices.
I had people ask me if I grew up in a tent, and if I rode a camel to school.
He didn't know me at all. And he started saying, oh, you know, Americans, you know, they're fat, lazy. And he goes, so how is it where you're from? And I said, well, I'm actually from the States.
Through food and fun, they taste new realities.
People are different, and people have different realities, and Berkeley, particularly being in the iHouse, has really taught me to know that these differences exist and be able to respect them.
We used to joke that if the president of Palestine and the president of Israel both lived in a house at one time and 30 years down the line were at the negotiating table, things would be a lot different than they are now.
While the world's diplomats discuss the post-war Middle East, dramatic changes take place in the old city of Jerusalem.
From Middle East crises to Vietnam, from the Gulf War to Bosnia.
When you have points of crisis in the world, the encounters during these times can be particularly challenging. Sometimes you'll see people from countries that are on different sides of the political spectrum or different sides of history, shying away from each other. Sometimes you'll see them reaching out to each other as individuals, trying to understand the other point of view. The beauty of International House is that it offers the possibility to connect. We're not saying that everybody connects, but it's one of the few places where you can connect if you want to, and you can see the other version of history.
Understanding history is exactly what created a future for the Lim family.
Places on campus.
Who are these people?
They were students at Berkeley also. When I was growing up in Vietnam, I had this prejudice against the Chinese people. And I never imagined I would even want to make friends with the Chinese.
But much like the encounter Harry Edmonds had, Tanyan Lim would also meet a Chinese student who would change her life. It happened her first night in Berkeley when she became sick, and this Good Samaritan helped her.
And at that time, I felt so ashamed about my feeling towards the Chinese. I changed my view right at that moment.
What happened next is one of thousands of International House love stories. Now open to friendships with the Chinese, she met and fell in love with the man who would become her husband.
And I'm so thankful. Due to iHouse, I met him because he's such a wonderful husband and a wonderful father as well.
Thank you. So from an enemy to become a husband.
We have been married for 28 years.
In honor of their union against incredible odds, they chose a very special name for their firstborn son.
I kept talking about America, about Berkeley, about International House, about those good old days. And Benito told me that, how about we name our son Berkeley? And I thought it was a good idea.
Stories like this from International House's rich history are the most powerful testament to today's students that through them, the vision of founder Harry Edmonds is kept alive.
The object here was not merely to house men, but it was to bring them close together, to see that despite their racial and national differences, they were more alike than they were different. That was the thing that we were trying to do.
That was Harry Edmonds' dream, and it is realized every day by students like Topden Searing and Gaia Zhou, who are putting aside national differences to form a lifelong friendship.
I think we are friends already. Yeah, I think she would say so. I think we are friends already.
What matters is not conflict. I mean, that's just life. We have conflicts every day. We have to face it. But what's important is people can sit down together, talk with each other, communicate, understand each other, or at least try to understand each other, and then work things out. And that's the lesson I've learned.
In our world, you may not be able to teach tolerance, but International House certainly inspires it. For the Visionaries, I'm Sam Waterston.
If you would like more information about the Visionaries, the organizations profiled, or the Visionaries Institute of Suffolk University's Master of Science degree in Philanthropy and Media, call 1-800-647-5559 or visit us on the web at visionaries.org.